All right. Yo, what's up, everybody? Just back with another video. It's been a little while. I want to get back into the swing of things in the NBA offseason and get you some content about the 2025 free agency. So I got 6 takeaways. Couldn't cover everything in this video. I'm going to make some more about it, but kind of my top 6 takeaways from some of the bigger free agency kind of fallouts, so draft to free agency. So let's get right into it. All right, first takeaway from the 2025 NBA free agency is get used to this new form of free agency. It's been like this for a couple of years now, but I did still see some complaining on the timeline about the lack of big names making moves and things like that, and not a lot of things to look forward to. You've got major signings. Those are kind of gone now. You're not getting major players moving. Those guys are re-signing and getting traded later on. It's been like that for several years. This is just another year where it kind of emphasizes that. Get used to that. I think that's going to be the way it is. I mean, we've got the caps going up in the next couple of years, and so maybe we see some movement with the Lakers opening up some free agency alongside Luka, or some cap space alongside Luka in the next year or two. But I do think this is going to be the main form, and you're not going to see these LeBron decision type of moves anymore, these seismic free agency kind of shifts. But most of the time, those major things that we're thinking about, those seminal moments in free agency, those were mainly concentrated towards the major market teams. I know there was some stuff that that we're not thinking about. Those are mainly focused on the major market teams. Now, this new cap space environment, but this new CBA, I don't think it necessarily helps the small markets as much as it may have been told to us, but I think it does reward smarter front offices. Now, you're going to have teams that are crunched for cash. You're going to have teams that skip the aprons or try to avoid the aprons. You have teams like Boston that are going to have to shed salary. You're not going to have these dynasties, which I know a lot of people, especially people that grew up in the 90s or kind of went through their formidable years in the 90s, remember the Bulls, and they remember the Lakers of the late 90s, early 2000s. And then you've got other teams like the Warriors and the Heat, and things like that, and the Spurs. Those are the memories a lot of people have about the NBA, and it's going to be a little bit different. But I think it's going to give a lot more parity, and I think as potentially with this new TV deal with Amazon and NBC, I'm hoping that they use that to really build up the health of all these other NBA markets and not just reliant on these large LA, New York, Miami style markets that people remember, but they build up these other smaller markets and highlight stories and things like that. So we'll see if that happens. I still think free agency is fun. I think, like I said, smart front offices are going to be able to navigate this really well. I have some other things later on that highlight that and some of my other takeaways, but at the end of the day, your team's going to need to hire smart people to run this. You're going to need to have owners that are willing to pay when needed, but also step out of the way and not be like Matt Ishbia in Phoenix. So yeah, so the first takeaway is really just this is that form of free agency we're going to get used to. Number 2, Milwaukee. What the hell? What are you doing? Part of me admires the Bucks for doing everything possible to make Giannis happy. As a fan of a small market team in the Memphis Grizzlies, I'd hope that we would if we had a star like Giannis, that we would do everything to keep them. But it's probably gonna be decades before you have a player as good as him, as good as Giannis. So I understand doing everything possible to make him happy, but I think we're bordering on the line. We're on the edge of being a little bit irresponsible here. And I think that trading him should have legitimately been on the table. You do have a title with him. If you've mortgaged your picks twice now for Drew Holiday and then for Damian Lillard, and moving to trade him before he specifically asks out, I know it's not going to make everybody happy. People are going to be upset, but it makes for a healthier market for the star instead of him specifically saying, I'm only going to play here. Maybe it still turns into that, but at least you have a chance to get somebody to come in and swoop in with a lot of assets, hoping that they can sway him on staying where their team is located for the long term. So I think with Milwaukee, waiving Dame to have $22.5 million on your books for the next 5 years, just so you can sign Miles Turner, while I think it does make you a little bit better maybe in the short term, you're basically paying Miles Turner $50 million a year now. He got 4 years, 107. Add in that $22.5 million that you stretched for Damian Lillard, and you're basically paying him $50 million average for the next 4 years of his contract, and then an extra year of the 22.5 after that. It's still not going to be done. So are you okay with paying Miles Turner that much money? No, that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to continue to build out pieces around them when they already have a really rough roster. I think you at least have a puncher's chance in the East next year. It's going to be really bad. Miles Turner probably does improve slightly improve your chances next year to maybe win a first round series. And then if injuries happen, you never know. Nobody really predicted the Pacers to make the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years ago, and they didn't even predict them to make it back there again this year, and they made the finals. So, and they went to 7 games with one of the best teams we've seen in a long time. But you at least have a puncher's chance in the East. So, maybe it'll be fun. Maybe you'll get a Cinderella run, and Giannis will go otherworldly in the playoffs, and nobody will remember this if he wins another title. All right, so number 3, my third biggest takeaway from this year's free agency is Atlanta. And congrats. Enjoy this, Atlanta. You now have a smart front office. You get to be the darlings of this year's offseason. You navigated the draft really well, trading a late 20s pick to get Porzingis, whose value is down and who Boston needed to shed, who, if healthy, is a really good fit next to Trey as a big. You also got Nickeil Alexander-Walker on a 4-year deal, sign and trade. Didn't really have to give anything up but a second-round pick for that. Luke Kennard on a 1-year deal. You're highlighting some of your young pieces that you've drafted, and you're really building something around Trey that gives him the best chance to be a star and really find out if he's a star that can take you deep. You had the Eastern Conference Finals trip a few years ago. Can he do it this year? You're going to be one of the favorites in the East next year. The main takeaway is that enjoy this, Atlanta. You're going to get all the media, NBA media, patting you on the back, giving you kudos. You're kind of threading the needle here with gaining future assets, like you did with that trade with New Orleans, where you let them move up to 13 and you move back, and you got that Bucks Pelicans pick swap for next year. So you're threading that needle of being a competitive team right now, but also gaining some future assets. So it's a fun place to be in when you have a smart front office and you're making good offseason moves and you're winning on paper. Hopefully it works out on the court and you're able to be a fun team next year. But kudos to you guys getting off the DeJounte Murray trade last year, admitting that was a bad move, and still when he had a little bit of value, finding a team, dealing with the Pelicans again, dealing with the dumb teams, another good, smart front office move, and getting some of their picks and getting Dyson Daniels back was really good. So the third takeaway was Atlanta. Enjoy this. You probably are going to get anointed as the winners of the offseason. All right, number 4. Fourth takeaway from free agency. This team didn't really make any seismic moves, but they re-signed some of their guys, and that's Memphis. And my main thing with them is stay the course. The Bane trade was not something that's easy to do. When you've had a team that's competed at a high level and you have a player that most everybody agrees is worth his contract, it's not easy to trade that guy and take one small step back to hopefully take a couple steps forward over the course of the next few years. Even when the package is really good and you get a lot of picks, it's still hard to do that when he's a fan favorite and it's somebody that fills a need for you. But you realize that things needed to change and that sometimes you got to do that small reset in the middle of your team, not a rebuild, but a reset. So, and I also love to see that they started immediately using the assets to get better now and to go after players that they wanted. Moving up in the draft for Cedric Coward, who became the darling of the draft, and then going out in the offseason and being able to get a value deal on Ty Jerome, who a lot of people thought was going to get more money, who his playoff kind of shortcomings may have depressed his market a tad, but still getting a value deal on a player that had a great season last year. Well, maybe it's a flash in the pan, maybe he is sustaining something over the next few years, but you were able to get something of value there and actually get somebody to come to Memphis, which is great. And then the main 2 moves were obviously the renegotiation and extension with Jaren. Still actually not a crazy high deal for somebody that's made 2 All-Star games and won a Defensive Player of the Year. Average annual value over that's going to be about $48 million. And some of these new contracts that you're going to see are going to put that to shame, and continuing to have a valued number 2 player that checks a lot of boxes and that tends to get better every year. I think that was a great move, keeping him there, selling him on Memphis and staying the course. And then Santi, who re-signing your young players is a really important thing. It's going to be harder to do if you have really good young players like Oklahoma City's going to come up with in a couple of years. But getting him on something that's a little bit above the mid-level, about $17 million a year for the next 3 years, I don't think is going to cause any cap issues due to that Bane trade, having some flexibility there. So I really like re-signing Santi there for that number, seeing if he can continue to reach higher levels. And then overall, stay this course, shoot for something in the next 2 to 4 years to make your move, and then be ready to make your own version of the Bane trade like Orlando made this year. Memphis has gone after guys like Bridges and Anunoby in the past, offered a lot of their picks, couldn't get the teams to make the moves, tried to acquire like Jimmy Butler and Kevin Durant. Those guys didn't want to play in Memphis. But there's going to be somebody eventually that comes available that you're going to be at the right place at the right time and be ready to make that move, give up those assets to do that, and hopefully that Bane trade built up the war chest for you to be able to do that. All right, number 5, my 5th takeaway is going to be the Lakers and the Warriors. I put those two together for this one because I think both of these teams have some similarities, but there are also some key differences in the places that they're at. Steph and LeBron are both on the wrong side of their careers, but they're still amazing players, and they're still killers when it comes down to the clutch. And the Lakers seem to be pivoting towards the Luka future, which I don't think is a wrong move, but I don't think that they're executing it in the best way. It's kind of haphazard. Maybe there's no way possible to not deal with to not have the dramatics of LeBron and on his future. But right now, you haven't been able to make the moves in free agency to make the team better in the short term, which when you do have a player like LeBron who is still playing at a high level, you don't want to totally throw away a season, right? You are in a huge market. You made an amazing trade with Luka that it's hard to even understand that, but you were able to do it. And I don't necessarily know if their front office is the one that needs to be executing this reset around Luka. We'll see if Pelinka is somebody who really leans on his relationships in the league. It worked out for him with Luka. It's worked out for him in the past. Maybe the free agency ends up being something they can take advantage of in the next couple of years, but we'll see. We'll see if he even stays around for it. But moving on to the Warriors, it's hard to be too negative because they did have such a good run in the mid-2010s. And you had the title in 2022 when nobody really thought you were at that level. But it kind of seems like the Warriors thought they were the smartest kids in class, and they tried to do this 2 timeline thing, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of that with Jonathan Kuminga. And there's, in my opinion, been a lack of tough decision-making in that front office and in that ownership group. And you're kind of ending up with Steph being stuck on a play-in team for the end of his career. And I live in the Bay Area. There's a lot of Warriors fans here. I'm not the biggest Warriors fan. It is tough to see a player like Steph continue to go out there and play at an amazingly high level, but with less and less around him. So if you think Jimmy Butler is not going to eventually make this situation about himself, you must be really new here, because that's eventually going to happen. And while maybe he makes your team better right now, I don't know if that was necessarily the move to go all in on. And you still haven't been able to make a decision with Jonathan Kuminga that's going to improve the roster and get him in another place. So Lakers and the Warriors, they're trying to thread some needles here. We'll see if it works out for them, but I have my doubts. And finally, number 6, my last major takeaway from the free agency is Denver. And I just wanted to say thank you. Finally, there's been some strategic thinking going on in that front office, and you're putting some pieces around Jokic to help him potentially win another title. Taking that Oklahoma City team to 7 games was a testament to his greatness this year, especially with losing your coach right before the end of the season and the mess that the front office created. But the Cam Johnson and Michael Porter Jr. trade was really good, in my opinion. You save some money by getting off of Porter's contract and then bringing in a lower salary in Johnson, while not giving up that much, in my opinion, in terms of current on-court value. Maybe a little bit in the long term, ceiling. Maybe Porter Jr. is a little bit better in the long term, but I don't think it's worth holding on to that. And you gave up the 2032 unprotected first, which is going to be a good pick most likely, but it's worth it to give up to maximize Jokic's value right now, as good as he is, because he is that good, and you should be making those moves with a player like him. And that move allowed them to bring back Bruce Brown for a minimum, and bring in Tim Hardaway Jr. on a minimum as well, which is going to have some veteran presence around Jokic, who he clearly likes to play with guys that know what they're doing. And I think both of those guys, we've seen it with Brown already, and I think Hardaway is going to be able to find the right spots to maximize his production there. And then Jonas Valanciunas might be the best backup center that Jokic has had, at least somebody that the offense is not going to totally tank when Jokic takes a break. And that's really all you need, 10 to 12 minutes a game in the regular season, where you don't give up a 15-2 run and have to immediately put Jokic back in the game. So I like the moves they've made. I still have my doubts on if the team's going to be good enough to really not let every playoff series go to 7 games and be completely worn out in the playoffs. But at least this is going to be a more fun team than last year's squad. And we'll see if they can make some more moves on the margins to highlight that. So those are going to be my top 6 takeaways from NBA free agency. I'd love to do some live streams or something like that. I know it's not a huge channel, but I'm trying to put some more content out there. Leave some stuff in the comments. Leave something in the comments if you think live streams would be cool. I'd like to just do a little bit more open forum stuff and talk through things a little bit slower. But yeah, appreciate you watching. Gonna subscribe would be great if you're down for it. Yeah. Peace.